Today, we're diving deep into an incredible chapter from the Gospel of Matthew. It's a story that really gets to the heart of what faith looks like. It kicks off with some serious doubt from, well, the last person you'd ever expect, and it ends with one of the most comforting invitations in all of Scripture.
I mean, it's a question we can all probably relate to, right? We sometimes think faith has to be this unbreakable, constant certainty. But what happens when cracks start to form? What do you do when the one person who seemed the most sure of everything suddenly starts to wonder if he got it all wrong?
So here's the bombshell. Who is asking this question? It's not a skeptic, not a doubter from the crowd. No, this comes from John the Baptist, the prophet who literally prepared the way for Jesus. And he's not even asking in person. He's sending his followers from a cold, dark prison cell where he's left with nothing but his thoughts, wondering if this man Jesus is really the one.
So you have to ask, why the sudden doubt? Well, think about what John had been preaching. He was talking about a Messiah who would come with an axe bringing fire and judgment. That was the expectation, a powerful king who would finally set things right. But the reports he's hearing from prison, they're about Jesus healing people, having dinner with tax collectors, and talking about grace. The reality just wasn't lining up with his expectation, and he needed to be sure.
Now, Jesus' answer here is just brilliant. He doesn't just give a simple yes or no. Instead, he turns to John's disciples and says, essentially, don't just take my word for it. Watch. He's building a case, not on a claim, but on real observable evidence. Evidence that points directly back to the prophecies in the book of Isaiah.
So the evidence starts rolling in. He tells them, go and tell John what you hear and see. The first piece of proof? The blind can see. Now, this wasn't just a random miracle. It was a specific sign the ancient prophet said would happen when the Messiah arrived. It's a direct callback to Isaiah 35. Jesus is telling them, report the facts. The prophecies are coming true right in front of you.
And the evidence just keeps piling up. The lame are walking, lepers are being made clean, the deaf can hear. Each one of these miracles was like a signpost, pointing to the Messianic age. This wasn't just a display of power. Jesus was systematically fulfilling the scriptures that John knew inside and out. He was answering his doubt with undeniable action.
And then come the final, most powerful pieces of proof. Raising the dead. I mean, that's an unmistakable act of God's power. And maybe just as important, the poor are hearing good news. This fulfilled a key prophecy from Isaiah 61, and it showed what his kingdom was really about. It was for everyone, especially the forgotten ones. The case was pretty much closed.
After laying out all this evidence, Jesus adds this one last line. It's gentle, but it's also a challenge. He's basically saying to John, look, I am the one. But my kingdom, it doesn't look the way you thought it would. It's not about military might, it's about healing hearts. And accepting that kind of Messiah, well, that requires a whole new level of faith.
So after John's messengers leave, Jesus immediately turns to the crowd. He knows what they might be thinking, and he wants to make sure that nobody mistakes John's honest struggle for weakness. In fact, he's about to pay John the highest compliment imaginable.
Jesus starts asking the crowd these great rhetorical questions. What did you go out into the desert to see? Some flimsy reed blowing in the wind? A guy in fancy clothes living in a palace? And of course, everyone knew the answer was a loud no. John was tough, he was bold, he was the real deal. Jesus is reminding them of the powerhouse prophet they all rushed out to see.
And then comes this incredible statement. Jesus says that in all of human history, no one born has been greater than John the Baptist. Wow! He's identifying John as this pivotal figure, the last and greatest prophet of the Old Covenant, standing right on the doorstep of the new kingdom of heaven.
But then, the tone shifts, big time. Jesus goes from praising John to calling out the very people standing right in front of him. He calls them this generation, and he points out how impossible they are to please. You can almost hear the frustration in his voice. The people's hypocrisy was just ridiculous. They looked at John, who was super disciplined and ascetic, and said, he must have a demon. Then they look at Jesus, who eats and drinks with everyone, and they call him a glutton and a drunkard. The point is clear. If your heart is set on disbelief, you will always find an excuse. Jesus then gets really specific, calling out the towns where he'd done most of his miracles. He compares them to wicked pagan cities from the Old Testament, like Tyre and Sidon, and says that even they would have turned from their ways if they'd seen what these towns saw. It's a sobering message. Seeing more evidence means you're more responsible for it. They saw all the proof they needed, but they just refused to change.
Okay, so just as the chapter hits this peak of judgment and rejection, it makes a dramatic pivot. It's amazing. After calling out the proud and the stubborn, Jesus offers one of the most personal, gentle, and famous invitations ever spoken.
And this is really the heart of it all. To everyone who is tired, worn out, burdened by trying to be perfect for God, weighed down by sin, or just exhausted by life, Jesus offers a solution: Himself. And notice, the invitation isn't come to a religion or follow these rules. It's come to me.
He then breaks it down into 3 really simple steps. First, just come to Him. Second, take His yoke. Now back then, every rabbi had what they called a yoke. It was their unique interpretation of the law, their whole way of life. To take a rabbi's yoke meant you were signing up to be their student. And third, learn from Him, specifically His gentleness and humility.
You know, the image of a yoke is so important here. A yoke was a tool designed for 2 animals to share a workload. So while it does mean submitting to His teaching, it's not about being a slave, it's about becoming a partner. It's about walking side by side with Him, letting Him share the load.
And that leads right into this beautiful promise that finishes the invitation. Unlike the crushing weight of religious legalism or the heavy burden of our own mistakes, the life Jesus offers is easy and light. Not because life suddenly becomes problem-free, but because you're no longer carrying the weight all by yourself. It's a life-giving partnership.
So we end right where we started, really, with a question for ourselves. This chapter lays out the evidence for who Jesus is, plain and simple, and then it gives this wide-open invitation to find true rest in Him. So it leaves us to wonder, what's standing in our way? Is it our own expectations? Our pride? Or maybe just our fear of accepting an invitation that is so simple and yet so completely life-changing?